Do you also feel like the world has been on fire lately? For people who care, it's easy to let anger take over or to just feel demoralized and done with it all. I myself have felt very overwhelmed with it all and have a hard time trying to stay hopeful when it just seems like there's constant bad news and just tension everywhere we go. So, I wanted to talk with my mom about how we might try to find hope when it feels like there is none, and how we can keep caring when it feels like nobody else cares at all.
It is so easy to feel overwhelmed when we are surrounded by chaos, surrounded by uncaring actions, by situations that just feel worse by the day. It makes all the sense in the world that our feelings in the face of that would be overwhelm and maybe despondency or numbness. But what I think is helpful in moments like this is to, if we can, in the midst of the overwhelm, if we can narrow our vision a bit. So instead of seeing and hearing and taking in all of the things, if we could bring in our sight more closely to maybe what's right in front of us, because the reality is that in daily life, there are hopeful things happening. There are people treating each other in kind and caring ways. And these things are not being reported or shouted about, but these are everyday moments where people are caring for each other, offering each other compassion, providing hope to each other. And these are the moments that we will completely not even see when our vision is so trying to take in everything. But when we can become smaller in our scope of what we are taking in, I believe we'll be able to see these moments of care and compassion that really continue to shine forth the hope for humanity and the hope that we bring each other. Because one of the things that we know is that when we can see hopeful things, or we do see moments of care happening between people, and it brings us a sense of hopefulness, that matters. It truly matters. We feel more uplifted when we see that, and then we are more apt to be act in hopeful ways ourselves, which in turn brings a hopefulness to others. So the thing, when we are able to see these hopeful moments in just the quietness of everyday life, it makes a real difference for how we feel and then how we go about responding and interacting in our daily life, and the way we can then bring hope and provide hope for others.
I totally agree, Mom. And another thing that you said, and I think we've talked about before, is that we're at a rare position in the existence of humankind to be aware of all the chaos and all that is happening on a state, national, global scale. It feels like we're inundated. We're surrounded with all of these, all of the bad news and all of the chaos all the time. So, what you're saying about focusing on the small, what we are seeing around us with our own eyes and not necessarily through the internet. That sounds like it could be really helpful and something that I want to try to remember too, when we're in the midst of doom scrolling. So, Mom, talking about some of these smaller stories that maybe don't get as much attention, has there been anything that has been giving you hope lately? Any stories or anything like that?
Recently, I saw the most wonderful videos that came from the New York City Marathon. So in some of these videos, what I was seeing is that runners were running themselves, but they were also pushing people in wheelchairs as they ran. So maybe these people were friends or family members or people from the community, but the people in wheelchairs would not otherwise have been able to participate in this New York City Marathon. And so the runners had made a commitment to push their fellow humans in chairs the whole way. And so what it made me think about was how much more difficult that runner's job now was. They weren't only, having to carry themselves the length of the marathon, they were also having to push another human the entire length of the marathon. So the task was now made more difficult for the runner. But what brought me such hope was that it mattered to the runners to do this, that it was worth it to the runners to make this extra effort to bring their fellow human along this journey with them. That their fellow humans weren't going to be left out, but they were going to be able to join in together. And pass all the people in the stands and along the side of the road cheering. All the people in the wheelchairs would be able to also take in this joyous moment, because their fellow human would go to the trouble and make the extra effort to make sure that they experience this part of life as well. This brought me such hope, because it was just such an example of the compassion that humans can have for each other. And so it was those images that brought me such hope. And it seems like it lifted my spirits for the whole next few days.
Mom, that story really proves that, humans have the capacity to do such good for each other. And it really, really brings me some hope just hearing about that. So thank you. And one thing I wanted to bring up is that beautiful act of humanity was happening at the same time as all the ugliness and chaos that we hear about that's happening in the world. So the fact that something so good and beautiful can be happening at the same time as that ugliness just shows that we don't have to wait until the world fixes itself, until all the ugliness dies down, to start looking for that hope, to find hope, and to actually, be that hope. We have the capacity to do that right now. And it's really that, honestly, that gives me hope, the fact that we don't have to wait, because otherwise we'd be waiting a pretty long time.
That's right. And I think it's so important too to know that this is not about like some type of toxic positivity and just, pretending things are okay, because clearly a lot of things are not okay. And it is so valid and so real that the feeling of overwhelm or disorientation or hopelessness, these things and these feelings are valid and are real. And so, what's important to know is that, like you said, the other piece that's happening in life is also real. And so, sometimes what we are able to do is to shift our gaze to re engage with the places where there is hope happening, to shift our gaze and re-engage with we're in the places where there is real compassion being given, where humans really are helping each other and caring for each other. So in those moments when it does feel overwhelming, to know that it's okay to feel the overwhelm, and it's also okay to find ways to move the gaze to moments that may be quieter and may not be as profound in some ways, but are equally valid and that are life giving, and where you really will see hope and human kindness interacting and finding realness in the world.
Yes, I thank you, Mom. Thank you for saying that, because focusing on the small, it might be something maybe like going to the grocery store and having a nice interaction with the cashier. And I think a lot of times we're so in this fog, we're on autopilot almost, where we kind of like, if you're not opening your eyes to it, you might miss some of the kindness that's there. And I think, like I was at the grocery store the other day, just like head down, kind of focusing on checking out my groceries, and but the cashier just wanted to have like a lovely conversation with me, just being kind and making conversation. And as soon as I opened up and was like, oh yes, so talked back with her, it was just such a nice, kind interaction that I walked away from feeling hopeful about humanity just because of that one kind interaction. And if I hadn't been open to it and I had just kind of ignored her, that wouldn't have happened. Mom, this kind of reminds me of that quote that's out there, and I think I've heard you say it a few times too. It's that when you can't find the light, be the light.
Yes, that's so true. And it's sometimes important to know that you don't necessarily have to feel hopeful to act in hopeful ways. So even in moments that you don't you feel like everything is just right, if you act in ways that are hopeful, and like you said in your story at the grocery store, the lady who was she was purposely engaging and seeking to have a moment with her fellow human, and to have a kind moment with a stranger. Sometimes acting in ways of hope itself brings about the feeling of there being hope. So things don't always have to be just right to go ahead and act in ways that are shining light into the world.
Yeah, and that hope can be contagious, and you never know who might catch that hope from you putting it out there in the first place. Thank you so much, Mom, for talking with me and talking with us. For those watching, I wonder what's helping you stay hopeful lately. Let us know in the comments. I'm Michelle. That was my mama, Ashley, and thank you for joining us for Secular Sunday. And we'll connect again soon.